Paul McCartney and John Lennon were responsible for creating most of the Beatles' iconic songs, but they were not always completely satisfied with the results of their collaborations. After the band's breakup in 1970, John frequently criticized their past work, especially Paul's contributions. In the early days of the Beatles, John and Paul would often write songs together at Paul's childhood home in Allerton. However, as the band progressed into the late 1960s and internal tensions started to grow, their creative process shifted. They began writing songs separately and only later presented them to each other for feedback and final adjustments. These growing artistic differences led John to openly criticize some of Paul's work, particularly after the band disbanded. For example, John expressed his dissatisfaction with the 1967 album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, stating that he never enjoyed the single Hello, Goodbye, and he also dismissed the medley that closed Abbey Road in 1969. One of the most notable songs written by Paul that John did not appreciate was Let It Be. Paul explained that the inspiration for the song came from a dream he had during a particularly difficult time for the band while they were recording the White Album. The dream featured his late mother, Mary, who had passed away from cancer when Paul was just 14. In the dream, she reassured him that everything would be okay, which led Paul to write the lyrics. "When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Speaking words of wisdom, let it be." Paul later reflected on the dream, describing it as a blessing and an important moment in his life, which helped him create the song. He shared that the song was meant to convey a sense of hope, faith, and resilience, and it resonated deeply with many listeners. Despite its widespread popularity, John never seemed to like the song. According to The Rough Guide to the Beatles by Chris Ingham, John initially thought Paul had been inspired by Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water, although Let It Be had been written a year earlier. During the recording of Let It Be, John expressed skepticism about the song's message, even asking if they were supposed to giggle in the solo. His dismissive attitude toward the song continued after he left the band. In a 1980 interview with Playboy, John stated that Let It Be was purely a Paul creation, and he felt it had nothing to do with the Beatles. He further claimed that the song could have just as easily been part of a Wings album, hinting that he couldn't understand why Paul wrote it in the first place. Despite John's criticism, Let It Be became one of the Beatles' most successful songs. It was released as a single in 1970, shortly after the band's breakup, and topped charts worldwide, reaching number 2 in the UK. The song also became the title track of the band's final studio album, released in May 1970. In a review for NME, Derek Johnson described Let It Be as a track that demands attention, one that stops you dead in your tracks and compels you to listen attentively. Meanwhile, High Fidelity magazine's John Gabri praised the song as the best thing musically that McCartney has done. Despite John's reservations, Let It Be has since become an enduring anthem of hope and resilience, continuing to be celebrated by fans and critics alike.